11A, and welcome to, I think this is Wednesday. I'm actually recording this on Monday, so you're in the future at the moment. So we're going to start looking at your essays. And as I said before, we're going to take this step by step to make sure that we're going to get the most phenomenal essays, that you understand the essay writing process, including the research and note-taking aspect. This will mean that in level 3, it's going to be a lot easier when you write your really big essay. And when you get to university, you'll be getting that 75%. So essay writing and your research skills are pretty much one of the most important aspects that you're going to be learning in GAC. So as I said, we'll take it step by step. We're not going to rush through it. And I'm going to hopefully give you some skills that you're going to be able to use for the rest of your life. So number 1, please make sure that you have your 008 book, We're going to be having a look at that in just a moment. But first, I wanted to introduce you to, before we do our research, it's good to have a little bit more of an understanding about your question. Now, I know that everyone has chosen their questions. So if you have a look here, sorry, hide. Okay. So Alice, we've got people in work, human health, man, environment, etc., etc. So you've already chosen what you're going to be writing about. The next thing that you need to do is actually analyze the question, get an idea of what you're going to be doing with your essay, have a think about different perspectives of your essay. What questions do you need to ask to answer the question? And where you can get your information from. So what kind of sources you can get your information from. So I'll start going through this section first, and hopefully your teacher has printed this off for you, but as usual, I have put it in WeChat as well. So I'll show you what I would actually do for a question that I've invented for myself, so you can see what you guys will need to do. So my question that I've put is, females and males may have a different experience of work, society, and existence as a whole. So that's the question that my teacher, for instance, might have given me. I've now put it into my own words, okay? My own words, so that I can go, okay, I definitely understand what this question is about. Gender can have an impact on life experience of a person. So I've made this original question into my own words, saying that if you're a male or a female, it can have an impact on your life experience. Next, I'm going to put my opinion. So what do I think about the question? The reason that you want to put your opinion is, if you put your opinion, it makes you start caring about the essay, and that makes it easier to research. As you know, it's really difficult doing things that you're not interested in, doing things that you find boring. It's very difficult to motivate yourself. So I find this is a really clever way to get you interested and help motivate you to complete the work. So my opinion is, women have been treated as second-class citizens without rights for centuries, okay? So I'm looking, how I actually feel about it is that women have been mistreated for a very long time. That doesn't mean that's what my essay is going to be about. That's just how I feel about it. And that's what the research is going to help me identify, whether that's true or false. So again, it's not about what the essay is going to be, but it gives you an overview, gives you some emotional connection to the essay. I'm going to have a think about some information, background information. And again, this is just you doing your thinking to start. You need to think before you do your research, okay? So we're going to kind of get a bit of a sort of a think bubble ready for us. So history of the topic I'm going to start with. Women treated as baby. You'll notice here as well that they're not full sentences, okay? You're not writing your essay. We're just thinking, considering the information. So history of the topic is women treated as baby makers. Women have no vote. Women not given the same rights. Some ancient cultures honoured women. Women as doctors considered witches in the West. 1900s in the West, women fought for vote, equal rights, burned bras. Okay. So now I've got a bit of an understanding, a little bit of context for me to start working with. Next, definition of words of the topic. So when you look at your question, are there any words that really need to be defined? In mine, woman is probably the most, woman and male, female or male are probably the most important. So women equals female anatomy and the ability to procreate. Male equals male anatomy, generally accepted as hunter, women as gatherer, man as strong, and woman as weak. Okay, so there's some definitions of some words. You might be writing about hypoxia, for instance, so you definitely need to define what the word hypoxia actually means. Then we've got the projection of the topic. So projection is, what do I envisage, what do I think the topic's going to be about? So mine, I'm thinking, is going to be about gender-based stereotypes are archaic. Archaic is a high-level vocabulary word, and it just means old. So archaic, you think of the word archive, so something that's old and in the past. We have evolved as a civilization and should evolve in how we treat different genders. Man and woman should be treated equally, paid equally, and have equal rights without inherent expectations. So when I've written inherent expectations, I'm talking about the expectation for a woman in particular to have to get married and have babies. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking my essay is going to turn out like. However, I've not done my research yet. So again, it's just a projection, an idea of what you think your essay is going to be talking about. Now I'm going to think about what sort of perspectives I should consider. And remember, perspectives is basically how you look at a particular thing. So I'm going to look at it from an economic perspective. So I'm going to have a look at the concept of man and woman from an economic point of view. And by that, I mean, do they earn the same amount of money? Do they contribute to the economy in the same way? If not, why not? I'm going to look from a historical perspective. So I'm going to look at men and women, what their roles have been historically, and any important historical moments. I'm going to have a look from a scientific perspective. For many centuries, women were considered weaker. They couldn't be in politics because they're too emotional. If I see any men shaking their heads, nodding their heads right now, I'll be very mad. However, I want to see whether there is actually any scientific evidence to suggest that one gender is better than another gender for any particular thing. And finally, I'm going to look from a cultural perspective. Different cultures have different expectations of men and women and the roles that they have, and whether that has an impact. And I'm going to think about some questions. Now, before I do my research, it's important that I think about some questions. If you don't have a question to do research, it's very difficult to research. And these questions can turn into straight Google searches. What caused the inequality in the first place? So why has it happened in the first place? Where did it start from? Are men smarter and stronger than women? Women are the only ones that can have babies, but should they have to? How do traditionalists see women's rights, and how do liberalists see their rights? So traditionalists are people that want to keep things as is. So remember when I said laissez-faire, you probably learnt that in 006. So someone that wants to keep the status quo. So laissez-faire, status quo, keep things as it is. And then liberalists, to be liberal, which means free. So they're probably people that want to see changes. They see something that they don't agree with and they'd like to change it. So how do the traditionalists see those rights, and then how do the liberalists? The next thing that you're going to do, as I've given you an example here, is where should I get my information from? What types of sources? So for instance, you cannot use Wikipedia. That is not, because anyone can actually write an article in Wikipedia. So maybe Cole would write an article in Wikipedia. Should we trust that? Maybe, maybe not. If it's a doctor that's written something, again, anyone can write that they're Dr. Fiona or Dr. Johnson or Dr. Apple. So we can't use that because it's not a reliable source. So before you start your research, think about where could I get the relevant information. For me, I'd go to gender studies journals from universities. I'd look at historical documents, the Bible, historical letters, and history books. I'd look at current media, social articles and celebrity articles, as examples, but I wouldn't use them as evidence. Okay, so because it's current media, again, anyone can write it. You need to make sure that your sources, when you're using something for evidence, it needs to come from a source that can be trusted. And then I'd look at non-governmental organisations for gender equality, for instance, the United Nations. Okay, so you're going to be doing all of that here for your own essay. And then we're going to move down into the next section. So we'll start off with this, and then we will look at this one in the next class. Okay, so don't worry about that one first. I just want you to complete this and get that through to me today. Okay. So before we do this section, I just want you to open up your books for me, and we're going to have a look at some information in terms of research. So page 75 in 008. If you can open your books, page 75. Okay. Next week, we're going to be talking about text, in-text referencing, and also reference sheets. So before you actually start your research, but this is going to give you an overview of the information that you're going to need when you're completing your research. So the date of publication or copyright, table of contents, index, preface, and glossary. I want you to, just by yourselves now, match up these with what you think the information is. Okay, so match what you think these are with this section. Okay, hopefully you've finished matching everything. If not, press pause now, wait until everyone has finished, and then you can press play again. So I'll give you just one more second. Okay, so let's see what we got correct. Date of publication or copyright. Copyright means that I own it. Okay, so if I was going to write a book, I need to get a copyright to prove that I own that information. So date of publication or copyright is B. So this tells you when the book was written, so you know if the information is new or old. Okay, so date of publication goes to B. Table of contents. C, this is a list of chapters at the beginning of the book. It can help you decide if the book has the information you need. Similarly, if you're using online, using a journal or some articles, they'll usually have a bit of a table of contents. You can skim through that and decide, yes, this is useful, or no, this is not useful. An index. So an index is an alphabetical list of topics and page numbers at the end of the book. So it helps you be able to find that information nice and quickly. I know that we won't be using books, well, because they're all in Chinese, I'd say, at your library, but it's still, this information is still relevant to internet sources as well. A preface is actually the introduction of the book. So it tells you what the purpose is. If you're looking at a non-fiction book, we actually call this the blurb, so it's at the back of the book. Otherwise it's called the preface at the beginning of the book, and it gives you an idea of what the book is going to be about. And then you've got the glossary, and this section is really helpful for you guys because it's got the definitions of any new or specialist words. It's kind of like a little bit of a vocabulary. Okay. So when you're trying to decide whether a source is going to be useful or not useful, these are some of the items that you need to have a think about. Does the content of the book address your research questions? So is the information relevant? If I'm talking about gender and the book is about ice cream, it's probably not going to be relevant. Is the author reputable? For instance, an expert in their field. So you can see if they're a doctor of philosophy, but they're writing about bananas, it's probably not, they're not going to be an expert in that particular field. Okay, so you need to make sure the author is reputable. Is the author biased? So when you're reading through, you'll see whether they're toward one or another. So often environmentalists, you might find a doctor of environmental science that will talk about global warming and will be very biased in relation to that. And that's actually fine. It still can be very useful, but you need to identify that bias because when we're writing an essay, we want to be as objective and unbiased as possible. In order to do that, we need to look at both sides of the same coin. Is the information accurate? So here, do they have actual statistics? Have they done research? Is there enough information, or is it just their opinion? Should it be just their opinion? It's not going to be accurate. It's not going to be an appropriate source for you. And then, is the information up to date? Okay. If you're looking from a historical perspective, that's different. But generally, you do want to have some information that is up to date. If again you're looking at environmental issues and global warming, you wouldn't read something from 2007. You'd want something from at least 2018 to 2020. Okay, let's move on. So research using the internet. So most of your research while you're at GAC, or all of your research at GAC, will be on the internet. But do keep in mind, when you get to university, you're going to have these incredible libraries, often with a little cafe down the bottom, but these incredible, beautiful, where you can find journals and periodicals and books and all of the information you've ever dreamed of. So do keep in mind that when you get to university, you can't just be using information on the internet. Okay, so there are no standards to say how good the material must be or accurate. So that's why it's really important to consider these things when you're looking at your internet sources. So in Unit 1, we looked at the importance of checking for reliability of sources when researching. You probably remember I wrote up that my father's name is Daniel Robert Leake. If you abbreviate his first two names, it ends up looking like Dr. Leake. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's a doctor, okay? So we need to think about the reliability of the author and of the source. So I now want you to grab a piece of paper and turn to your find a partner next to you. I don't want everybody up and running around. So either turn behind you or look at the person that's next to you. And I want you to write some answers to these questions. So which internet sources are likely to be reliable and accurate? How can you tell the information you have found has come from? So how can you tell where the information has come from? And how can you tell when the material was written? So how can you find out the date of that particular article? Okay, so I want you to answer these 1, 2, 3 questions, and then we'll continue on. Again, if you need more time, please pause the video and then you can restart the video once you've answered those questions. So if you're looking at which internet sources, one of the best ways to do is to use university articles or university databases. Also government articles, government databases, reliable non-governmental organisations, places like the United Nations. If you're looking up coronavirus, which I hope we never have to, again, you would look up maybe World Health Organization. So those are sort of some websites that will be able to provide you with appropriate and reliable information. How can you tell where the information has come from? At the bottom of the document, it should actually tell you when it was written and when it was published, and when it was written as well, usually is at the top of the document. So these are some web portals that they've suggested. However, I'm just going to have a look at the reliability of this GAC document, and I can see that it was last published in August of 2016. Now, lots happened in the last 4 years, And also I have a suspicion that while it was published, I don't think the information has changed because they're still looking at AOL, for instance, and Australia, why would you go to the government website? I don't know. And also iGoogle, which is now just Google. So I can see from this information that this is probably not the most reliable source when giving information about how to search the internet. We're not going to go through. So keywords is actually really important. And to be honest, you guys are really lucky, hopefully if you've got a VPN, to be able to use Google, because the algorithm really does, it can identify what you're searching for. So I would actually put directly, if I was doing my search for this, I'd even put this question in directly. So the keywords, think about how can I phrase in the most appropriate way the information that I want to get. Okay, so how can you best phrase that sentence to get the right information? And you might want to play around with how you put the words. So if I'm looking at global warming, but I want to hear from a biased perspective, I want to hear from global warming deniers, I would write global warming is a hoax, H-O-A-X, which means that someone's made it up. It's a conspiracy theory. And I'd write that in. And then I'd get the information from a negative perspective. So I might write something like this. 10 top warning lies that may shock you, arguments from global warming skeptics. So all of this information is going to give me that biased perspective. Then I might do global warming getting worse. This is going to give me the other perspective. So I'm starting to get some other different websites. And you can see that here, this has come up with climate.nasa.gov. And you know that NASA, and also the fact it's got .gov, would be relevant and interesting, okay? newscientist.com as well, I would be able to look at and see if the author is a doctor or not. I don't want the cookies. Sorry. Okay. Again, all of this is not relevant anymore because the Google algorithm. But this part of it is interesting. So narrow your topic, which is what you're actually going to be doing when you're using this document and grabbing those questions. Search good online is, well, basically use Google. I really do recommend that you use Google, not Bing or anything else. Choose authoritative websites that belong to well-known organizations. Check whether the information is reliable and verify the author's credentials. So do a quick search on their names, double check that they are experts. Okay, so your homework for today's class is just doing this, planning your essay. Okay, so you're going to be completing this for me for your homework. Don't worry about this section just yet. We'll have a look at that in the next class. Okay, thanks very much. As always, I'm going to be available on WeChat, so feel free to send me any messages and I'll be able to help you from there. All right, thanks guys, and I will see you next class.